Hello and welcome to Microsoft Learn Live. This is episode 13, and today we're going to be talking about SQL migrations to Azure. This is part 2 of our series, so if you're interested in watching part 1, feel free to look at our channel and check out the link. My name is Ben Harding, and I'm a customer engineer in a team called Fast Track for Azure. You might hear me refer to it as FTA. And it is a Microsoft-funded program designed to coach, guide, accelerate, to grease the wheels and unblock customer projects, and as well as run sessions like we are today. So my team not only covers SQL and data, we actually cover all technologies on the ever-expanding Azure stack. If you'd like to know more about FTA, one of our moderators will pop a link into the chat shortly. For me personally, I've been working with SQL Server directly for almost 20 years, and I've been with Microsoft for 10, been in Fast Track for 5 years, so basically 5 years non-stop helping customers migrate to Azure. I'm based in Canberra, Australia, and co-presenting with me today is my colleague, Osamu Hirayama. Osamu, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Osamu Hirayama, based in Tokyo, Japan. I'm also a member of FTA, Data Analytics team, and I have focused on SQL Server-based database technology for over 20 years at Microsoft. So today I'm going to show you the migration execution demo in the session by using Azure Data Studio to support you understand the actual migration process. Thank you. Over to Ben.
Thank you, Osamu. And so just a reminder, we are presenting this session live. So if you have any questions throughout, please put them into the chat and our moderators will respond and potentially surface these questions through to Osamu and I. These sessions are best when they're interactive. So, please ask any questions about SQL migrations that you feel like. So speaking of moderators, in the chat today, we've got Nathan Widdop and Kruti Mehta, who is going to be answering your questions and helping us out today. So onto the next slide here. I just wanted to show you a resource that Osamu and I put together. Okay, and this is a link to a Microsoft collection. Okay, and a Microsoft collection is really just a collection of links and useful resources that we recommend our customers use when they are starting a SQL migration project. You'll see when you access that link, there's not actually a lot of resources that we put in there, and that's for a reason. There is a wealth of knowledge available on SQL migrations already. In fact, Azure SQL was one of the first services in Azure, full stop. So it's been around for a long time. When you do a search for, I want to migrate to, SQL Server to Azure, you can get links, and blog posts going back a decade or longer. So that's the reason why we actually didn't put too much information in this link. It's because there is so much out there. We wanted to make it really curated. And it's actually also the reason why we put this session together at all. So why build a session? Why come and talk to you today about SQL migrations when there's so much information out there? Well, the answer is because there's so much information out there, and we wanted to tell you a whole story, beginning to end. What's the best way we would recommend our customers today to do this migration. So, like I mentioned, this is part 2 of our series. So, feel free to go back and pause this, or go back and watch the other video later. But I wanted to really kind of highlight some things 4 things that we want you to walk away with at the end of this session. So, number 1 is we want you to know how an experienced DBA or DBAs would plan and test a migration from SQL Server to Azure SQL. Okay, we want you to know what the available migration methods and tools are that you can utilize, and so Sam is going to be doing that through his demo. I want you to understand what goes into a successful migration. So there's there's migrations and there's successful migrations. There's well planned and executed, and then there's ones that just executed. So we really want you to know what does a successful migration plan look like, and how to make that happen. And last of all, we want to show you, we wanted to talk about what happens to the post-migration phase, often forgotten about, but it is really important to get the most. Like, hey, you're in Azure now. What are some of the cool things and features that we can start doing? So with that, that's going to be pretty much almost it for PowerPoint slides until the very, very end. So I'm going to switch across to our GitHub repo, okay, which you should see on my screen very shortly. And we're going to take it from here. Okay, so this GitHub repository was put together by a few colleagues, and we continue to maintain it and update it. So if you want to get this link, and I'd strongly encourage you to do so, it is aka.ms/FTA live-SQL migrations. Okay, this you can take this; it's public, and we really built this for two purposes. One is our kind of presentation tool, but the second is really as a resource, an offline resource for you to take and read and refer to as you go through this migration journey. Okay, so this repository we use for part 1, part 2. So I'll just quickly want to rehash just what we covered in part 1, not in great detail, but just so you have got a bit of context of where we're at right now. Okay, so we're following the kind of Microsoft documented migration SQL migration workflow. So the first phase is the discovery phase. That is really about kind of if you're doing an estate migration, or like I say, a data center migration, this is like saying, like, hey, what have I got out there? What do I need to migrate? What is it exactly that I'm migrating? Like, what versions? What are the names? What are the size of the databases? Patch levels? Things like that. If you're not doing an estate migration and you're just migrating an application, like say, which might just be one database, okay, that's the discovery phase is less applicable, but it's still important to document what you've got. The next phase is the assess phase, okay, and when we talked about this last time, we showed you some tools about how you can conduct an assessment, and that's all about looking to see, is this database actually going to be compatible on my target platform? So I'm running it, let's say I'm running on SQL Server. I want to go to Azure. I think I'm going to migrate to SQL-managed-instance, for example. How do I actually know if that's going to be successful or not? How do I validate? And that's what the assess phase is about. It's about using tools and also processes, and also looking at documentation for if it's a third-party product, to really understand, hey, is this actually supported and going to work? Before we can then jump into the migration, we might need to remediate some things. So if you are using a particular feature inside SQL Server that's not supported on say, for example, SQL Managed Instance, what do you need to do? Is this going to be just a really quick, one-line code change? Is it just a switch in features? I was using this feature with SQL Server, but now I'm going to use this feature in Azure. It's about basically, just looking, fixing anything that you need to fix before you can achieve the migration. And if you're lucky, you don't need to remediate anything at all. So that brings us to what we're covering in this session today, which is the planning phase, okay, the migrate phase and the post-migration phase. The plan phase is definitely, in my opinion, strong opinion, is the most important phase, because the planning phase can often include doing a full test migration. It means that you're actually, you actually go beginning to end and fully validate it, so you know that it's going to work. A lot of emphasis, I guess, discussion is put on this migrate phase. Hey, what tool should I use for migration? How should I do the migration? What's the process? Offline, online, all that stuff. Like, that's all really important, and you need to decide that. But the migration phase is actually, that's not where you're making decisions. It's the execution. This plan phase is where all the decision making is occurring. And yeah, we could talk for the whole, a long time just about this phase, and I will. But it's really emphasize how critical it is. The next phase is the migrate phase, which is the execution. So if you have done a really good job in the discover, assess, remediate, and plan phase, migrate phase should just should really just be like put put your feet back, go through a checklist and a plan, do what you know is going to work. It's relaxing, hopefully, and successful. And then finally, we're going to cover post-migration. Like, hey, now, like I said before, what are some cool Azure features we can turn on now that we're here? So that's context of what we covered in part one, what we're going to be covering today. We're going to jump into it. All right.
Yeah, Ben, so I have a quick
Yes,
question. So
please.
if the customer want to use the new functionality on the target environment, so which phase is appropriate to check the new functionality on the target?
Ooh, great. So how do we look for what functionality they can use on the target?
Yeah. So in case of source is SQL Server 2012, and the target is SQL Server SQL managed instance. So user can use the kind of column store or um, something like that. So the customer need to test this functionality. So yeah, so I'm I'm wondering which is the best phase. So that you explained so before.
That's a good question. I would say it's in this. There's two parts. It's really, I'd say it's in part two. Like when we talking about kind of understanding, like what is Azure SQL. Okay, and I'll
Mhm.
just first of all, is you really need to understand the different types of SQL Server, like Azure SQL variants
Mhm.
that are out there. I don't want to go into too much detail today, but it's there's there's basically reading the documentation and there's a lot of documentation about doing feature comparison, like how you're running on, say, SQL Server versus SQL Managed Instance. I'll call out a really great table that I think was actually just in that last screen. Okay, this great comparison table. So if we look at this, so again, this link is in our repository. Feature comparison of Azure SQL database, SQL Managed Instance, SQL Server on a VM. There's a really fantastic table that calls out a lot of features and functionality, and says, so this is SQL Server basically on a VM, and this is SQL Managed Instance. Like, is a feature that I'm using, that I know that I'm already using, is it compatible with like SQL Managed Instance? And so this is the first place. Is there anything else that you would recommend to customers to how to work this out and at what stage?
Yeah.
Any other?
Yeah. So I think so it's better to understand the difference of functionality prior to a discover phase, and yep, and then so need to check the it's appropriate to implement the customer environment separate effort from the migration planning. So I don't think
Yes.
so. Yeah, yeah. So not fit the previous phase. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the migration planning is not about the features, the functionality of of the target platform, like say SQL Managed Instance. Like, by the time we're at this phase, which is what we're going to be kicking off now, is that decision making, in my opinion, should have already been done. And I think it's, for me, I think it's like it's not just a you do it in this phase. I think it's actually, it's like an iterative and sort of ongoing sort of decision. It's like, okay, well, we're picking our target, let's say SQL Managed Instance, and that's that's what if you're doing a migration project, that's that is the target platform that I would choose, and I advise my customers just as a starting point. And then it's like, okay, well, that's just starting point. Let's do a bit of education. Let's read about what's the functionality of SQL Managed Instance. And now at the same time, I want to actually assess my database, my specific database, and the features it has got. Because if you just look at that comparison table, for example, and you see a no for database mirroring, for example, if you go, well, like, okay, we're looking, our existing system uses database mirroring. I can see it's not supported on SQL Managed Instance, therefore I can't use it. Okay, that's not true, but potentially not true. If depending on how you're using database mirroring, if you're using it for high availability purposes, okay, you don't actually, you don't, if you do the education bit, you learn about managed instance, you actually understand, well, it's got high availability baked in. You don't need to deploy database mirroring to set up high availability, because the PaaS offering provides that with an SLA, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Great question.
Answer. Yeah.
Okay. Migration planning. I guess before I click on this this link, Samu, have you? I mean, you've been working with SQL Server for a long time.
Yeah.
You must have done a few migrations. What would you say? What do you think is in this migration planning phase? Like, what do you see customers do well, and any examples of things you see customers that they might miss out or they might forget to do? Is there anything that you could call out to say, hey, yeah, most customers, yep, good, they think of this, but maybe there's something else that they often don't think of?
Yeah. So in my experience, successful migration is it's usually it's sort of migration planning is the key factor for successful migration. If there is no good migration plan, so everything could happen during migration effort. So so the customer finds the database backup corruption, or the migration doesn't complete within the downtime or something like that. So customer, it's better to build, consolidate migration planning is a key to the good successful migration, I think.
Yep, I agree. It's the whole plan. it's everything about that plan that makes it successful. And in my opinion, I guess the thing I see customers do well is I guess focus on they get the migration bit, okay, and they and they go, like, if like, I know how to get my data from here to there, like, that's usually, I don't see a lot of issues around there. It's often maybe the lack of planning around when things go wrong, and they absolutely definitely do go wrong. I've done lots and lots of SQL migrations, and in one particular project I had, on every single environment that we were migrating, so it was actually it was a big system, had 5 levels, like dev, multiple tests, pre-prod, sit, prod. Every single time that we did this migration work, we found a new problem. And so it got added to the plan, and so by the end, the plan was just so exhaustive and really highly detailed. It's like, oh, don't forget to check the file permissions on this particular path and folder, because for some reason, this process, which we didn't realize was even running, needs this permission, and we've got to validate that. And so the plan became enormous. So I think it's about having this plan. So let's jump into the this particular content. I'm going to say it again, just because it's written on the screen. This is the most important phase of the migration. Okay, and so the first thing, as you're coming into this, okay, so if you have done your, like thinking about part one, okay, you've done your discovery and your assessment, you've remediated, you're like, okay, now we really need to think, how are we actually going to get the data from SQL Server and getting it into Azure? The first thing you need to do is not think about technology, but it's really go to the business and speak to the application owner or whoever can make this decision and ask, how much downtime can we have? That would be like my leading question. If they say you can have the whole weekend to do the migration, okay, that would, in my mind, depending on the amount of data, mean you could do what's called an offline migration. Okay. If they were saying, okay, this is a 24/7 system, okay, we can only have maximum 5 minutes outage, okay, then that becomes what's called an online migration. So that's the an early decision you'll need to make, because it can impact the tools and that you're going to use and the process that you might follow, might impact your rollback plan and lots of other things. So if it's offline migration, okay, and especially if it's a small database, winner, okay, it's usually a little bit simpler, okay, because you stop the application, gets shut down, okay, fantastic. You take it back up generally, or an export of the database, copy it up to Azure, bring it up there, do some testing, turn the application online now that it's probably been migrated onto Azure. It's what if the business gives me the option, that's what I would choose. If it's online migration, no problem. Okay, I would also, we plan for that. It means that we do a lot more pre-work. Okay, far more of the work happens beforehand, and that when it actually comes time for the cutover, it should just be everything just like a quick switch and done. So some things that could impact this decision making is going to be so that's just that's the first part. Okay, is like the business is going to tell you how long they can handle an outage for. Let's say they say 4 hours, and you think, okay, that's quite a long time, but maybe you've actually got 20 servers to migrate, or maybe you've just got a 20 terabyte database to migrate, which you just simply can't do within the 4-hour window. It's just, unless you have got much faster internet than I do at home, or anywhere really, it's just not going to happen. Okay, so that can also influence whether you go offline, online. And so that's the number of servers, number of instances, the number of databases, or if it's just the size of those databases. And then finally, the speed of the network. So that's like I said. And sometimes
So could you add comment? So if it's possible, so I think the validation test should be include downtime. So so before the open database to the users, some validation should be run to the target environment, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, spot on. That 4-hour window, it's not just for for you, the DBAs, or data engineers. It's for the whole outage, which can involve shutting an application down. Which, if it's a simple app, that's a 1-minute bit. But if it's a complex application, with hundreds of different application servers and even more integrations with other things, that can actually be quite a process. And it's not just, and I have seen cases where it's like, okay, you're the DBA waiting to do, kick off your component, and then, get a call from the application team saying, yeah, we've done it. We've shut everything down. You check the connections in the database, and you still see active connections in the database, which is part of the, which become part of your checklist before you actually take the word of the application team. I'm sorry, app dev people. It's to validate that the connection strings are closed. So it's not, and then as Osama just said, once you have done the migration and brought the database online, there's still potentially lots of other things that need to happen inside that window. So yeah, great call out. And so, this is like, if you're lucky, you'll just know, this is a 10 megabyte database, whatever. It's going to work inside my 4-hour window. But if it's like, well, I'm not actually sure, maybe, it's going to take us maybe 30 minutes to take it back up. It's going to take us 30 minutes to copy it up into Azure. It's going to take us 30 minutes to do a restore. And then we needed the validation and everything, all the other stuff. It's like, well, maybe we won't hit that 4-hour window. And so how do you know if you're going to hit it? Well, test. You really have to validate and test that your migration strategy is going to work for you. Okay. Next, one of the next things we want to talk about is doing a bit of housekeeping before you even begin the migration process. It's a bit like moving house. When you move house, you usually get some cardboard boxes, you lay them all out, and this is the bedroom box, this is the kitchen box, and you often have another box which is for maybe rubbish or maybe things for charity or for giving away kids' toys to family and friends, whatever, stuff that you don't want anymore. Okay, you don't need to take that with you to your new house. So the same is true when you're doing a migration. Okay, if it's quite funny. I mean, I've seen on SQL servers that have been running for a decade. It's surprising like how many databases will be sitting there just not doing anything. Like they've been migrated, or maybe they have all these database underscore date stamp or data, all these databases in read-only mode that no one really knows where they came from because people come and leave the organization. There's no point, there's no point taking those with you if you don't need them. So that would be one of the first things, is have a look at the source server that you've got and do a bit of a tidy up. So here I'm saying conduct a health check of your system. So maybe I'll ask Simon, if someone said to you, do a health check of SQL, what are some of the places you would look to validate if a SQL server is sort of healthy and okay? Like where are some of the places you might look?
Yeah, I think the SQL log files and SQL agent log files. In addition, so Windows logs like an application log and system log should be checked.
Yeah. Yep. Spot on. That's what I would do too. Yeah, and so especially I'd say most DBAs are familiar with SQL Server error log. So good, check that. One other point on that is that if the SQL instance has been running for a while, okay, and it by default we will roll over log files. Make sure you go back and look at when the instance last restarted. Okay, which if you're lucky, it's a stable system. It could be a while ago. But that is when SQL's booting up, it might throw out it might throw up just some error message or warning that it would never repeat again until it next restarts. So that would be a pro tip there. And same with say system event logs. You think, oh, my SQL server is healthy. You look at the system event log and it's just like, it's like a crime scene in there. There's red, it's red everywhere. It's you're seeing all sorts of stuff. If you're really unlucky, you're going to see things like disk errors. It's always as every DBA knows, it's always a storage problem causing all our woes. But if you're unlucky, you might see something. And hopefully it's just nothing because the system is hopefully still healthy, but you don't want to migrate something that's sick that needs fixing before you actually do it. And I have seen cases where it's like you do the migration, you get there and you're going, oh gosh, why is the SQL agent job failing? And then you go back and look at that source system and you realize, oh, it was failing there. It's been failing there for 6 months and no one's noticed. So yeah. Yeah, so yeah, Windows event log, like application system, SQL error log, SQL agent log. Also just, yeah, SQL agent jobs, okay? Tidy those up, okay? If, you know, quite often you see all these jobs, half of them are disabled, some of them are regularly failing. Good idea, just a bit of a check. Also run a dbcc check db, okay? That's a consistency check, okay? And that is basically validating, is my database consistent? Does it have any corruptions or not? And it's very, very rare that we see corruptions, but it's still, as a DBA, you should be running these on a regular basis. If you're looking at it, if you're managing a system that does not have consistency checks, you need to set those up, make sure they're running on a regular basis and that the databases are good. If the database is old, okay, you do need to, like, I forget what version. I don't know if you remember the top of your head, Osamu. You do need to run dbcc check db with data purity. It's a one, so you can do it once. Okay, it sets a bit in the database from a 0 to 1, and then forevermore, you always then get data purity checks as part of the overall consistency check. So I wish I could remember what version that was, but if anyone knows, want to pop in the chat, that would be fantastic. Okay. Also want to ensure, yeah, so like backups are running, successfully. It's just, this is part of a health check. When was the last time my databases were backed up? Like, I, want to make sure that this system is good to go. I've already mentioned removing databases, jobs, and also logins. Okay, logins and users, they are something you probably have to either recreate or migrate. So if you don't need them, save yourself some work and tidy them up as well. Okay, I'm just looking at my chat here. Okay, cool. Just checking there to see if there's any questions. It looks like they've been answered, which is fantastic. Okay. Not much more. Like, I'll be talking just for a little bit more, and I promise we'll see some live demos very soon. But the next phase is create a migration and rollback plan. So we've already been talking about this, like, what makes a successful migration. It's all in the plan, okay? And just give you an example, like I can't, show you one right this moment, but when I've done a plan, I often do it in Excel, okay? And by the end, I will have, it might be like, 100 rows or more, maybe, depending on the complexity of tasks to complete in the migration. And that, you might be thinking, that sounds complicated, but a lot of it is things like checking, like double check this, check that off, make sure that's there, make sure, like I said, mentioned before, checking that the application has definitely been shut down correctly, making sure that nothing has changed between when you wrote the plan and now, and that everything's absolutely 100% good to go. So it really should be thorough. And on top of that, it should include the timings for any activity. Okay, so if you need to take a backup as part of this migration, okay, you should know exactly how long that backup will take. Okay, and on top of that, I have seen cases where, and this has happened to me, unfortunately, where people have looked at they look at, say, okay, I've got reoccurring backups all the time, and they take an hour. But maybe as part of the migration, you want to back up to, say, maybe a different location, like a file share. Like, make sure you test exactly what it is that you're going to be doing when it comes to doing that. That's happened to me, and I got in a lot of trouble because this backup was meant to take, I forget, like an hour. Normally, it would always take an hour, but of course, during this migration, I was doing a backup to a different location. I can't remember, it was a different disk, or maybe it was a file share. For whatever reason, it was slow, much slower, and I blew out the whole change window, and we had to cancel it, and so people weren't happy. So making sure that that's the timing's being captured, and exactly, not just like, oh yeah, it usually takes an hour. It means like exactly what you're going to be doing. And on top of that, if you are going to be doing something like a backup, and it's not just part of a SQL agent job, then make sure you've got the code. Like, if you're used to using the GUI, fair enough. But I would strongly encourage everyone that anything that can be scripted, script it. Okay, save that script, in the migration plan, have a reference to that script so that if something ever happens to you, like if I'm doing the migration and I get hit by, I go out to get some lunch and I get hit by a bus, that someone can pick up exactly where I was running from. Okay, well, here's the script that Ben wrote. It said it's tested. You can just copy that, paste it in, execute. We know it's good to go.
So I think the migration plan should be include the point of no return. So what point is the recoverable or not? So it should be determined prior to the migration execution.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, when do you normally see the point of no return? What does that mean? In terms of the SQL migration?
I mean, the point of no return is go back to previous environment or move to new target environment. So yeah, so there is enough time to go forward to the target environment. So we need to go back to the previous environment. So this is the point of the no return.
Yeah. Yep. Good one. So I guess you could hit that, if you were doing, if we're actually if we jump forward a phase, we're actually in the migration phase, and you're doing the migration, and for some reason one of your steps took a lot longer than usual,
Right.
and it started to basically blow out. Yeah, you might reach a point of no return where you don't have enough time anymore to complete the remaining tasks. So that's really important. So if you're in a bigger organization, you might be lucky enough to have a release manager, and they should, that's their role. They not just looking at your bit, they kind of got the timing for the whole thing. Yeah, and they might say, look, sorry, Ben, you said the backup would take 1 hour. It's taken 5 hours. We've reached the point of no return, and we have to, call it off, and everyone's going to hate you. So great point. And something else as well, when I hear that term point of no return, is when you're if you during the cutover. So there are some migrations that the rollback can be, there's no easy rollback. Let's just say there's no, you can't, once you go to a system. Well, let me say, for example, and this has actually changed recently, but let's say you're running anything but SQL Server 2022. Let's say you're running SQL Server 2017. Okay, you take it back up, you migrate to SQL Managed Instance. Okay, you turn the application, you validated it, you think everything's good, you turn the application on. Okay, data starts flowing through into this new migrated database. Okay, that is often that's often also referred to as the point of no return, because now you've got live data in there, and there's no simple way to take a backup from SQL Managed Instance to SQL Server 2017. The good news is, actually, maybe I'll have to someone correct me in the comments, because just recently SQL Server 2022, I had to double check if it's backported. I think it's just SQL 2022. Supports backups from SQL Managed Instance back to SQL Server 2022, which is awesome. But that is another, when I hear that point of no return, it can be in terms of well, the only way forward we have now is forward. Okay, we have switched across to the new system. We can no longer go back to the old system without literally shutting the application down and scraping bits of data out and putting them back into the old system. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on here. It's to say, try to do is when you're planning. So in this phase, we're just talking about migration, but actually, in my opinion, it's actually kind of a bunch of sub phases. Within this migration phase, there's there's this pre-migration, which is stuff you can do a week before. That might be for example, synchronize your data. It might be recreate logins. Okay, they can be created and sit there waiting and doing nothing. You can create maintenance jobs. You might be able to create monitoring, set up monitoring. You might be able to migrate SQL agent jobs and just disable them. If you do that, make sure you put a new step in your plan. Step number 97, re-enable SQL agent jobs. I've forgotten to do that before, of course. I'm sure lots of other people have. But do as much as you can, okay? So that makes that migration hopefully cruisy. Yeah, also migrate. It's like the valid. So there should be migration, like the validation steps, and make sure that you know what you need to do to validate. So, like once we're there, what questions might the business ask? And sometimes I've seen some organizations like to do row counts. I don't know what value there might be doing row counts, but maybe just kind of a more like a just a real sanity check. Like it's definitely everything's there, but make sure what you exactly going to do is is documented. And then also something that's really important that we this I would say something that I think people do miss sometimes, and that's to capture a performance baseline of the source system. So once you migrate, if the performance is not what you expect, or you're hitting some performance issue, you have got something to compare to back on-prem. We don't go into detail here, but if you look down in this repo, additional information, we've got links 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, about how to do that. I'd say like probably one of the best environments I had was that we just had rolling monitoring, okay, that was specific to SQL, that pulled out relevant information. We didn't have to do anything, but we didn't have to capture a new performance baseline because we had a system that had 6 months history of the performance of the system anyway. If you don't have something like that, look at these links, okay? It can be as simple as like running perfmon, okay, for ideally for some time, like a few days, a few weeks, a few months, capture that data, save it just in case, because you go into a new platform, things change, and your performance cannot. It can be simple, like simple thing like a query plan's changed, or it can also be the application team maybe at the same time as migrating they need to refactor some code, so they've modified some code. The application's not 100% the same, so therefore things could be a little bit off. Okay. Now that you've got this plan, you've written it out, now you need to test it, okay? Test it and record the results, the timing, okay? Some organizations actually, you have to document that you've tested the change before you can even proceed, but even if you have any overhead, as a data engineer, you are responsible for the organization's data, okay? And this is absolutely critical that you test the migration. And equally, if not more important, is to test the rollback plan. I have seen, unfortunately, in my current role, customers saying, it's often one particular example I'm thinking of is a customer. We got called in Friday afternoon, customers just about to migrate to Azure, fantastic. We look at the plan, there is no documented plan. We say, well, there's very few. We look at the rollback just says restore database back to on-prem. It's like, that doesn't even work. That hasn't been tested, and therefore the rollback plan is not valid. Therefore, abort the migration because it's too risky. I can't stress that enough. It's not a negotiable thing to do. So yeah. So that's it. Like, I've been talking for pretty much 45 minutes. Probably sick of my voice, but that's I really just wanted to hammer home. Migration planning is the most critical point. By this phase, okay, everything should be tested, everything should be documented. You should feel really comfortable. If something happens because as we all know, production's not always the same as the test environment, you've got a rollback plan, okay? That will get you out of trouble if something goes wrong, and that you've tested it and you know it's going to capture you. Simon, before we move on, is there anything you want to cover or add to the planning phase?
Nothing from my side.
Alrighty. Well, let's jump into the migration execution phase. So in this, although because we wanted to follow the SQL migration workflow, so this migration execution phase is in real life. This is when you actually do the execution. Here we're going to be talking a bit about what tools to use and to pick to do this. So yeah, just wanted we put this table together to show you some tools and options you have for an online migration. So if you're say running, it's assuming you're running SQL Server. If you want to go online, okay, to say Azure SQL Database, we've got transactional replication. Okay, is the way to do that. For managed instance, as you can see, we've kind of got a lot of other options. I would say log replay service, or this one, which Sam is going to demo, is the way to go. And then we also have a table showing offline migration tools. So we included this in the migration phase, even though by the time you're in this phase, this decision's already made. So rather than me kind of keep continuing to talk about these tools, how about we have a demo, check it out, and see how we can actually execute a migration. Samu, are you ready to
Yeah.
to take over here?
Okay. So I'm going to show you two migration tools through two demos in the session. So at first, we will review Azure Data Migration Service, DMS. So it's a little bit traditional migration service on Azure, but it covers a wide range of source and targets. So we will review it briefly to know supported source types, target types, activity types, etc. Then we we will move on the second demo, actual database migration by using Azure Data Studio. So currently it only supports limited migration scenarios, but it provides the end-to-end migration experience from SQL recommendation to data migration. It is expected that the supported migration scenarios will be extended in the future. So let's look at the new migration experience through the second demo. And
Awesome. Samu, I'm just
yep,
going to sorry to interrupt you, mate. Just are you able to zoom in just a little bit?
is it small?
It's just yeah, if you just jump in a little bit more, that looks a lot better.
Is it
Thank you.
better?
Yeah,
Okay.
brilliant.
Yes. So in this page, there are three demos, but actually, second demo and the demo are almost same. So I will skip third demo in the session. So okay. So let's start the demo from the Azure Data Studio, Azure Data Migration Service, DMS. So if you want to, so it's a little bit small. Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Yep. So if you want to deploy the DMS, so click Create Resource and type database, database migration service. Then click again. So this is the deployment page of the database migration service. So if you choose SQL Server source or AWS RDS for SQL Server, and you choose SQL managed instance of virtual machine as a target, Azure portal recommends not to use legacy database migration service, and it recommends it use the Azure Data Studio. Um, So because the legacy DMS is duplicated in the future, so for migration scenario with Azure Data Studio, is recommended. I will cover it in the second demo for more detail by showing actual database migration. For other scenarios, it's like this. DMS is still the primary database migration tool. So let's look at for more detail. I have already deployed DMS. So let's move on to the resource. So go to the DMS resource, and so to run the actual migration, so click this button, New Migration Project. So you can, it is required to name. Oh, it's not allowed space. So it's still allowed to use the uh, duplicated scenario like a source SQL Server and the target SQLMI or virtual machine. But this kind of informational message is displayed. It means this functionality will be duplicated. Then change the source. So in this case, change to the MongoDB. So target server type should be, in this case, Cosmos DB MongoDB API. And so you can choose some migration activity type from this pull down. So this source and target allows offline data migration, online data migration, and just create project only. So by clicking create and run activity button, so migration project is created and you can run it for database migration. So that's the DMS on Azure portal and how to configure the DMS project. Okay. So let's move on to second demo.
I'll just add that the
Oh,
from
yes,
my
please.
understanding with the deprecated version is because basically, I mean, I'm going to get ahead of you, sorry, Samu, but yeah, previously to do the DMS with like a SQL migration, like it was mostly doing this through the Azure portal. That functionality has been moved into Azure Data Studio or
Yes,
ADS
right.
now, which is what we're going. And I think it's for the better. It's a better user experience. So strongly recommend ADS.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for your follow-up. Okay, so let's move on second demo. The actual SQL migration demo by using Azure Data Studio with Azure SQL Migration Extension. So at first, I will show you the demo environment quickly. So there's source instance. This is the SQL Server instance, SQL Server 2017, and this instance has database, AdventureWorks DW 2017. It is the source database of migration. Then there is a target SQL. It's a Azure SQL managed instance. So there is no database for now. So, after the migration, AdventureWorks will be created on this target SQL. Okay. So start the migration. So launch the Azure Data Studio, and at first it required to connect the source instance, source SQL Server instance. So this is the source SQL Server instance that just show you, and it already connected. So then right click and choose manage. So you can find the menu of Azure SQL Migration. So click here. So to start the migration, click this button, Migrate to Azure SQL. As a first step, you need to choose the source database. So as I mentioned, I use AdventureWorks DW 2017. Check it and click next. So on the step 2, you can get skill recommendation and assessment result. So to get the skill recommendation, click Get Azure Recommendation. So to get the skill recommendation, it is required to provide the performance information. And there is two options for providing performance data. First one is collect performance data now, but it will take almost 10 minutes. So I have already collected performance data, so I choose the second option. I already have the performance data. And I specify the folder which contains the performance data. Okay. Then click Start button to get the skill recommendation.
Hopefully, this is if you've watched part 1, you'll know that this is where a demo didn't go so well. So let's see if we can make it a bit further this time around. Hopefully, the demo gods are looking at us kindly today, unlike yesterday or Tuesday.
So you can get the skill recommendation for each target. SQL Managed-Instance and SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machine. These are generally available. And in addition, there is a preview functionality for the migration Azure SQL database. Yes, it's currently it's still preview, but it's possible to get the recommendation. So let's check the detailed information of skill recommendation for managed instance. So based on the performance data, so recommendation is generation 5 general purpose for virtual cores, and the storage size is 32 gigabytes. And that you can find the reason of recommendation here. And so in addition, you can find the source property of the performance data. So CPU usage, memory usage, disk usage, something like that. So yeah,
we only need 0 IOPS according to the report.
So there's a very not busy environment. I get the information.
A little bit lighter on. That's okay.
Yeah. So same with previous targets. So you can find the same information, skill recommendation, and storage recommendation, and the reason, and the source property. Okay. The same with previous two. You can get the recommendation for the Azure SQL database. Okay, then in this case, I choose managed instance as a target. So you can also get the assessment reports. So to view the assessment reports, click this button, View Select. Okay, and choose the source database. Yeah, assessment results reports. So display some issue in this page. So it is related to XP command shell. So Ben, what's the problem for the migration to the managed instance?
Well, yeah, managed instance does not support XP command shell.
Yeah,
It's a it's for people who don't know, it's a way for and SQL Server to basically for SQL Server to open up a command prompt and run
yeah,
a command, like anything that you want in the context of the service account that SQL Server's running under. So it's really useful to make to extend the functionality of SQL on a Windows machine. But because we're running on it's a PaaS platform, we don't expose the underlying operating system. It's not available in managed instance.
yeah,
We kind of we covered this a little bit in part one when we talked about remediation.
yeah,
But
right.
what do you like for X? I mean, this that comes up. I'd say just about every single actual assessment that I've looked at. What are the options here, Osamu? How do we overcome the lack of XP command shell? What would you do?
Mm, run the Azure functions or other. I'm not sure, but I don't think not to use this type of OS command in the managed instance.
Well, I guess I'm going to give the best Microsoft answer I can give and say it depends. It depends on
Yeah, right.
what you're using XP command shell for. Like
Yeah,
I've seen, sometimes it's just something really. It's like a file copy. I need to copy a file from A to B. In which case, there's no operating system. Maybe you don't need that functionality when you get to Azure because you've migrated to something like Data Factory. Sometimes it's calling some external script, or so if you're lucky, it's just something that can be easily done in another service in Azure, like you said, like an Azure function or maybe Data Factory or gosh, just a logic app or something. Who knows? Just something else that's not SQL managed instance.
yeah. Thank you. Perfect answer.
Yeah, it depends. It's the best answer.
Yeah. Okay. So in this case, I ignore this warning because the migration itself doesn't fail. So I can remove the script that refer to XP command shell after the completion of migration. So then select the click next. So next, I need to specify the target SQL managed instance. So it should be deployed prior to the migration, of course. Then there are two options of migration mode. First one is online and second one is offline. So, so as we mentioned, the suitable migration mode depends on some factors like downtime, database size, network bandwidth, something like that. So in this case, I choose online migration. Then we need to specify the backup file location because database backup file and transaction log backup files are used for the migration. And yeah, they should be stored on the file share or Azure Blob storage. So in this case, I choose Azure Storage Blob Container.
And
So
what I like,
yep.
I just wanted to add in
Yes,
here. So what I
please.
like about this is that most environments you've got rolling backups happening anyway. So what this is really saying is like it's putting onto the DBA. It's like like you need to get those backups in that storage blob container, which generally is just a just set up a process. And although you're thinking, oh, I can't just like automate that, well, that's I guess put it on a network share, but then that creates issues like, well, how do you
Yeah.
especially with the old DMS, like how do we expose that network share to Azure and make it an automatic process? So this actually puts the onus on the DBAs to say it's like, which is a good thing because you're already taking backups. The database server is most likely buried inside the corporate firewall. You can just get the backups, get them into the blob, container, whatever method you want, and good to go.
Yeah. Thanks for your comment, Ben. So then click next. Okay, so we need to specify the DMS for Azure Data Studio. Yeah, I already deployed this, but it's possible to deploy from here by clicking New, like this. Yeah, so it's required to choose the resource group and name and just click Create button. So you can create DMS for Azure Data Studio migration. Okay. So in this case, I have already deployed for this. Click Next. And you can review the migration summary. So target, source, and the migration mode, and the backup location or target target SQL managed instance information and the database migration service. Okay. Then it all the information is okay for you. So click Start Migration button. To check the status, click here. Okay, so in this migration effort, so log replay service LRS is used in the background of this migration. So LRS is a service with functionality similar to log shipping in SQL Server. Okay. Okay, so currently all database backup file and transaction log files are restored. So you can know about this here. So it's also there's also information to complete the restored backup files. So it means ready to cut over. So let me check the database status on the target environment. So
And while you're doing that, in the real world right now, like obviously the source database is still running, transactions are still going in there, you're still taking backups,
yeah,
transactional backups, and yeah, you need to be kind of shipping those or copying those backups into that storage account. As soon as the
yeah,
service sees them sitting there on that container, it goes, oh, fantastic, and it just restores them. And then you'd see the state changing back to restoring, and then it would switch back to like ready to go.
yeah. So for now, so this is the target SQL managed instance. So database is exists, but the status is restoring. So Ben, what's happening on the target?
On the target, yeah. So if anyone's done a like log shipping before, this should look really familiar. The full backup has been restored. Okay. Any differential backups have been restored, and any transaction log has basically been restored, but the database has not been brought online yet. It's special. This restoring state is a special state for a database that it's where you can continue to apply transaction log backups
Right.
to. Okay, so it's ready. So it's basically ready. You can continue restore. Yeah.
Yeah. So to open the database to the user, you need to notify the SQL managed instance. There's no transaction logback files anymore. So to do so, click here, complete cutover. So by checking here, so you need to confirm there's no more transaction log backup files to be restored. Then you can click complete cutover.
So a question, what happens to the source database here? Obviously we know, well, we have an expectation what's going to happen to the target. We're going to, hopefully the database gets migrated, but does anything happen to the source database?
Source database, at the source database, all transaction should be stopped before the cutover, and then tail transaction log backup file should be taken and copied to the blob storage, and it is required to confirm the tail log backup is restored to the SQL managed instance.
Cool. And so,
Yeah.
can I go through this process and do a test migration without impacting my source database, assuming that let's say I don't do a tail log backup, but if I want to test the migration, is this going to take my source database offline or anything like that, or is it safe to do?
Yeah, so I think there are some option. Yeah. So one option is shut down the SQL Server source instance.
But what if I don't want to? What if I'm just someone's taking our advice, they want to do a migration test from, they're testing their test plan. Can they do this safely without impacting that source production? Let's say they're doing a test in production, naughty.
Yeah.
Let's say they're doing that, they don't want to impact production. Can they
Yeah.
safely use this tool and do this cutover without taking that database offline? I mean, we can go and have a look at Management Studio right now, and that's hopefully going to answer the question to see if the source database is still looking, what state it's in.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it depends on the situation.
Yeah, well, let's have a look at Management Studio. I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but let's have a look at let's see if the cutover's
Yeah. So
cut.
yeah. So migration status is changed to the succeeded. So this migration is completed. So check the target environment. Yeah, database is not recovering. It's open to the users. So you can run the query to the
target, yeah. I was recently, while you're running that query, I was recently asked, I've done okay, now that I've taken the database out of that restoring state, I've hit complete cutover. Can I basically revert back to that restoring state and sort of continue that synchronization? And the answer is no. Like once you cut over and bring that database from restoring to online, okay, that's it. And if you've done this as a test, you need to go back to the very beginning and get full backup, copy it. And I know that can be if the backup files are really large, that can be, that potentially can take hours or even days if it's really gigantic. But yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah. Thanks for all up. So yeah, that's the actual migration execution demo by using Azure Data Studio. It provides the end-to-end migration experience. So you can download it whenever you want. So play around with this tool and find it useful and convenient for your database migration. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And before we switch away, can we just have a look at the source SQL instance there, and we should see AdventureWorks on your local SQL Server. Yep, that's what I would expect to see. That database, that source database, okay, is unaffected by this migration and by this
Right. Yes.
because we are. Yeah, sorry, didn't ask the question clearly before, but because we are just dealing with the source system's backups, not the source database, okay?
Yes.
This means that, yeah, you can, if you, again, naughty, don't do this, but if you wanted to test this in production, okay, it's not going to impact that production system, especially if you're already leveraging the backup files that you're probably regularly taking anyway. So if someone said, Ben, what's your favorite tool for doing a migration? It's either log shipping or going to Azure log replay service, or using Azure Data Studio, as Asama just did, which behind the scenes is using log replay service, and because it leverages the backups that you're already taking. It's lightweight, no dependencies on the source system whatsoever besides just copying the backups off it. So I think it's the way to go. So Asama, thank you for the demo. We're going to switch back across and look at look at our GitHub repo. Just want to call out a few links here, and then we'll talk about the post-migration phase, and then we'll wrap up. So just looking at our oh yeah, so here we go. Yeah, looking here, we've got just on this phase here, a migration execution phase. We've got all these tools you can have a look at. One thing I want to call out, if you're going to Azure SQL Database, okay, and you have to use a backpack file, have a look at some of the options like the oh my gosh, it's just skipped my mind. Bulk copy tool. Oh, I think that's what it's called. It's the fastest way to do backpack migrations. Check out some additional information. So this demo is about SQLMI because it is our recommended target platform for migrations. But if you're going from SQL Server to SQL Server on Azure VM or SQL Server to Azure SQL DB, of course, there's tons and tons of information out there. If you're running a failover cluster instance, okay, or an availability group, a bit more of a complex migration, we've got other additional options now. We've got, like, for instance, we've got managed instance link. Yeah, lots of different options. So, and if you we can cover that in another session later. And one other point, because I saw in the chat there was something about Azure Migrate. So in this session, we're not focusing on that estate migration. Okay, we're focusing on specific databases, which is for critical systems, important systems. It's the migration that I would use. Okay, Azure Migrate is great if you're doing lift and shift, and you need to do lots of servers. And you want to do them quickly and in a straightforward manner. The downside of Azure Migrate can be sometimes, like if you're going from VM on-prem to VM on Azure, is that you don't get a chance to implement all the best practices on that target VM in Azure. You don't get to lay out your disks in a nice way, and for high performance, you don't get a fresh install. You don't get to set up lots of other things. So, like, I love Azure Migrate, and it makes migrating, really easy and good. But yeah, if for critical systems, my guidance is to actually do a database migration. Okay, so we're getting really short on time here. So post-migration phase. Okay, so let's just pick up from where Osamu left off. DBA said, fantastic, we've migrated. We need to run some validation tests now.
Yeah. It's a difficult. So everything is very important, and so especially yeah. So validated performances are important.
Yeah. Valid, like, we won't go into too much detail, but you should be doing, like a validation, like as a DBA, before you even tell anyone the migration successful, I would just do what Osamu did. You log on, can you open the database? Can you run a query? Yep. Then you tell the application people, they'll probably turn the app on and start doing their own tests. So you need to validate the performance. Start capturing a new performance baseline. So once, as soon as you go live, you need to be ready to go to start capturing that info. Next 2 points are really important. Okay, optimize for cost. So we've talked quite a lot a bit, especially in part 1, about how to pick the right SKU. We know that Azure SQL, there's lots of different flavors. So even on the SQL managed instance, we've got general purpose, business critical. We've now got these new high performance options too. We've got the number of vCores that you can scale up and scale down. So now that you're here, we've done all these predictions to get in the ballpark of what we think the right SKU is. But now is the time to actually, validate, are we at the right size? And on top of that, you can start doing, are we at the right size for the right time of day? Can we scale up for business hours and then scale down out of business hours to save some money? Like, why not? This is the cloud. This is what we can do. And last of all, start looking at enable additional features. So, like one of the first things I would do is as a DBA is to get familiar with things like Azure, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and go look at your secure score. It's like a free security consultant inside your Azure subscription that will tell you, like, hey, you are doing, if you did this, you can actually increase the health of your environment from a security perspective. So, and there's also, if you're running on Azure SQL DB, there's like automatic index creation, automatic tuning, and lots of other cool things you can switch on. So that's the post-migration phase. This one I love because it's something that if you're coming from on-prem to Azure, okay, and especially if you're going from running VMs to PaaS, there's a whole bunch of stuff you don't need to do anymore. But don't need to install SQL anymore. But you get this awesome new thing that you couldn't really do that much on-prem, and that's like your cost optimization. You can actually be, help the business save money. We've got a bunch of best practices, which I'm not going to go through here today. Yeah, lots of things to consider now that you're running on Azure. Hopefully, you've considered these a bit beforehand as well, and maybe you're already running an existing solution. But like I said, I wanted to call out Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Oh, also something called a vulnerability assessment that's specific to SQL. It does it does a kind of health check against your target system, which is fantastic. And then the last thing is Azure Advisor. That is doesn't have a security focus, but it's more like it does give you, it will tell you can save costs by going from 8 vCore down to 4 vCore, for example. It's a free advice. And who doesn't like free things? So, so check those out. Okie dokie. I'm going to just share my PowerPoint, and I know it's not going to. Oh, it did. Yay! It did play nice for a change. Okay. Hopefully that's come up here. Give me 1 second. So let's wrap up this section. Let's wrap up this, wrap this up. So this is part 2 of a part 1 series. Part 1, we covered the first 3 phases of the migration. Today we covered the plan, the migration execution, and post-migration phases. These just, want to hammer home some really 7 key points. Number 1, the planning phase is the most important phase. I've told you I'm going to say it lots. I've said it lots. I'm saying it again. Your execution phase, like what Osamu just demoed, should just be chill. Okay, should just be, I feel confident because I've tested it. This plan should output a, so this planning phase should output a plan, okay, that should be detailed and contain a rollback plan, and both the, and jumping across to point 4, the migration and the rollback must be tested, okay? I'm using the word must, absolutely non-negotiable. Like going back to 3, include all your timings in the plan and make sure anything that you need, like any artifacts such as scripts, you've got beforehand. Okay, and again, they've all been tested. Number 5, do a tidy up of the source system before you migrate. 6, let the business guide you on kind of what migration you're going to do. So what's, how much downtime are they willing to accept? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 4 hours? Is it a whole weekend? Okay, that can really change how you're going to do that migration. Although I would say even argue though, if you're going to managed instance, I would probably still use log replay service just to make my life easier, because again, it's pre-work I can do. And even if the business says you can have the whole weekend, I could be like, I only need 5 minutes, boom, do a cutover. So I would still potentially just use log replay service or Azure Data Studio. And again, final thing, we've migrated, everyone's high-fiving, job's not quite done. We've got this post-migration phase, and that's important to validate that we've right-sized. Okay, everything's looking good, and yeah, we're good to go. So just a reminder that we have our Microsoft collection. Okay, the link is up here on your screen right now. We've been flashing it across the bottom of the screen, I've seen, and I'm sure it's been popped into the chat too. As well, don't forget to access the repository that we were using for this presentation, aka.ms/FTA-live-SQL migrations. That is very up to date, great resource. We designed it as an offline resource for you to continue to use. Feel free to rewatch all the series that have been part of the Learn Live series. Got the link up on the screen here. And, oops, we'll just go back to that one, if you let me. So that's it. Thank you so much for sticking with Osama and I. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today, and we really hope you enjoyed this session.